Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. We bring you thought-provoking guests and topics every week to challenge your thinking about leadership. Our aim is to help you become the leader that you wish you always had as we learn together and lead together. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honoured today to be joined by Hubert Grealish. Hubert is an innovator around brands and team building with a particular focus on creativity and what is the secret sauce for creating innovation and creativity in your teams. And he does have this marketing background. He has this brand building background, but we're going to be focusing today on the leadership aspects of that. What does it take to create innovation, creativity, and all of these things in your teams? So, Hubert, without any further ado, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about your background and what inspired you to be so focused in this area of work.
Great. Thank you very much, Mick, for having me. I'd like to say, I think that the real focus calling for me has been an osmosis over time. We come from an era in the 20th century. I was educated and born, and we come from an area of somewhat verticalized thinking. We're going through our school education. If we have one, we go through the third level. If we do that, or a vocational, we find that very quickly society puts us into a certain vertical area, an area of expertise, an area of vocation or whatnot. But within those vertical areas, there's very little scope for breaking out. In other words, translating that into society, people are busy creating products, services, vertical categories, areas of interest, which we never really see the light of day. And through my own journey and career of engineering into marketing and brand and those sort of catch-all categories, I found the one thing that sort of divided them, but also unified them, was we were missing a chance to bring a lot of those dots back to the collective awareness. Of course, now with the recent internet, we're seeing a lot more independent leadership, which I find really fascinating. So all of a sudden, the university professor who may have sort of a large ownership of the thought leadership, or supposed once upon a time, is being superseded by someone out there in the field, grafting, grinding, and that may well be, clickbaiting. Sometimes some people are moving around. And I think time and again, I'm coming around to this notion of leadership. And leadership, for me, we can get into the definitions of that, and the creativity of those things is very important. And for me, one definition, because they would tend to change or evolve, one definition, and I'd be interested in your thoughts, for leadership is our ability to harness the best of the intention and bring it to life in a community that matters. Just as one iterative view on the role of leadership. So for me, leadership is really not just trying talent. There's many styles of leadership. That's why it's not set in stone. There's no 10 commandments somewhere of leadership. It's really about what are the best tools and ways of thinking or approaching and problem solving right now to help us perhaps even extract the best of the intention from an initiator or an inception of an idea and bring it to life in a culture and a community that matters, that we think is important to us or part of the intention. And that sometimes can go against your own personal grain of, ideology. Leadership is ultimately a humble journey. And if we're trying to enforce the certain type of leadership, which can be totalitarian or dogmatic, then we find ourselves in another kind of, sometimes a zero-sum conversation. Or is that ever going to end in a win-win? Maybe. There's always a sort of a time and a place for certain types of leadership. So I find as we go through this sort of knowledge economy and knowledge working, a big part of my evolution has been almost inadvertently realizing and trying to grapple with the notion of how do I approach these conversations? How do I approach these leadership moments? How do I create a team? How do I be part of a team? How do I manage upwards? And I found in my journey and my evolution that sometimes opportunity knocks and other times opportunity passes, whereas you may still have the credentials and you may still have the product or service. And I was very interested in solving that problem, or starting to solve that problem for myself too.
It's really interesting here, and I'm sure this is not intentional, but you're kind of touching on many of the philosophies that we have here at the Leadership Project. So let me share with you our definition of leadership, but then I'm going to build on some of the things that we believe about leadership, and it really touches on what you're saying. So our definition of leadership is the ability to inspire people into meaningful action around a worthy cause. And what we fundamentally believe is that when you inspire someone to do something because they want to do it, that they're always going to do it with their full heart and soul and energy. Now, what we believe about leadership is that we believe the role of the leader is to create the environment where people can do their very best work. And part of that is to help people to identify what their own individual superpower is. And it's that ability to bring a collection of diverse people together that all have individually different superpowers, and to create the environment of co-creation where when you add up the sum of the different parts, you end up with something that's much greater than any of the individuals could have created themselves, which I think is where you're talking about with these kind of, you have these people with deep expertise, but it's the leaders that are able to bring it together. How does that sit with you?
I absolutely adore that because it completely chimes with how I look at it myself. So I'm glad, first of all, that I have some modicum of support in this conversation, and I'm not entirely right or wrong. I don't want to be right or wrong because either is an absolute and we never really get there. But also I really do appreciate, and I'm very encouraged because it's a learning journey for me also. I'm very encouraged that, it's a familiar tonality here. And I really, really like the way it described. I can't believe it. You're actually stealing my views on how I tend to view a successful team. And so you certainly mentioned some strong themes, having different ways of looking, different aspects, different sort of capabilities in a team to create that truly diversified or even decentralized kind of way of working. But I really, really appreciate that, and making sure first and foremost that it ties into what motivates the person, and it's not patronizing and it's not limiting, but it's actually tying into what motivates the person, what they want to do, as you said. So I really, really get that. And that then, of course, comes into other areas of accountability and ownership and things like that. But while you were describing that so positively to me, I was thinking of one leadership example and summarizing it, and I was even reviewing it today myself, helping people enjoy the experience. Because work is work, but enjoying the experience is important work. It doesn't have to be fun. It can be fulfilling. And so helping people enjoy the experience is a really nice turn of phrase, which I'm really enjoying at the moment, because it allows people to tap into things that create the space for psychological freedom, creativity, motivation, that cocktail, which is personal and subjective, which is really important. I think it's really, really good to allow people and help people enjoy the experience. One of the mission statements I've used myself over the years, because we know that every corporation remembers its mission statements, don't we? Well, we know they don't also. So I try to challenge myself, and I try to bring a little bit of enjoyment to the conversations if it's possible. Sometimes I'd say my mission statement is, and I'm borrowing Lord Quinton Bell, who wrote a book on PR years ago, which I read, and his mission statement was build business, make money, find fun. And I really liked that, because for me, I used to, and I do use it from time to time, because it allows me to remember what it's all about. It's not about build my business, make me money, and make sure I have fun. It's not a dictatorship, and it's a cultural thing. So it's a rich territory, and I do believe that if people feel safe, they can have fun, and if they know what the mission is, they can work back from that, and then you can really thrive. Because who are we to say we're anointed to know all the answers for every challenge? The audience is genius, the team is clever, and between us all, we can have a hive mind of solutions, plans, and outcomes if we're humble enough as leaders to embrace that.
So I want to unpack that a little bit more. That's really interesting. So one reminder here, and we've said this on the show before as well, is as leaders, we do need to remember that we are responsible for the place where people are spending up to 1/3 of their lives. So I love this thought about enjoy the experience, right? But you just said something really interesting, Hubert, and that was the audience is genius. Tell us more what you mean by the audience is genius.
Well, as we may hear it in I'm personally interested in areas of psychology, marketing, all those things, but comedy can give us some great clues too, because comedy, to some extent, is the modern journalism. So I'm borrowing on a certain comedian, I can't recall who it is, some original iconic comedian said that the audience is genius. And I've really embraced that in marketing and business, because feedback and the market is genius. If you are putting something out there, how on earth can we plan for something to react to get a response entirely as we intended? And any successful company, I was talking to Apple last week, they're, successful companies will always, to some extent, try to prescribe the conversation. But then if it's really going to land, the end users, customers, have to resonate with the conversation, which usually means we can bake the bread to a certain amount, but the customer will sometimes tell us they don't want this, or they want some particular, they want to have a sense of co-collaboration with you. They want to have a sense of ownership for their products and services they're buying, or we market it enough so they think it's take it or leave it. Again, there's no clear formula. So I think that enjoying the experience and the audience is genius is a kind of catchphrases to help us realize that we can make our best laid plans, and our best laid strategies, but to throw another one in the mix, culture does eat strategy for breakfast, and the audience will outwit your best competition. And one thing I've been training in junior marketing people is no millennials around here. We're all young people once. And I think by doing those little endeavors to try and loosen up people's ability to realize there's empathy in the conversation, then you have the chance to lead the conversation. But if I say to someone younger than me, I'm older than you, I know best, well, I don't think that's really going to motivate them. But if I say, gosh, I remember when I was in my early days, in my early career, in my early challenges, I was probably thinking about X, Y, Z, and I was probably missing home for the first time, and I was probably on my journey, and here's what I may have learned. I might get the ear of those people. And if I even share that I had a few laughs and share, it might be my personality. If you share your experiences to an extent, you might help people feel reassured to come forward with their own challenges, and then you can help them.
So I think there's multiple levels of what you're sharing with there, Hubert. And I want to share with you what I'm taking away and test it with you. And then I think we can build the narrative from there. So the first thing I'm taking away is this humility. And you've brought up being humble earlier. And now you're referring to, again, not pretending that you know all the answers. The example you gave of the older person going, well, I know better. No, you don't know better. How about parking your preconceived ideas and listening with an open will, an open mind, an open heart to what others have got to share from their perspective and from their level of experience and diverse backgrounds. All right. So I'm hearing that humility come through. Then the multi-layers of what I'm hearing around this metaphor of the comedian. And what comedians are truly gifted at is the ability to read the room in real time. That ability to know, is this working or is it not working? And make these little adjustments. And this is why no two comedy shows are ever completely identical, because they're essentially reading the room and they're reading everything about the way that the audience is reacting to their performance. And the two layers I'm now picking up is a leader can do that in an adaptive leadership style to understand what is resonating with their team, what is working. And then when we get to the creativity and the ideation and the problem solving, you then brought the customer into the room and you spoke about co-collaboration and essentially co-creation. So instead of taking your team into some back room and ideating and developing a product and then launching it in the market and then crossing your fingers to hope that it would sell, you're bringing the customers into the room and you're building it together. They were my takeaways there. How does that sit with you, and what am I missing, or how would you build from there?
Excellent active listening, I must say. I'm very impressed because I buy it. And also, I really do agree with it in all seriousness. I think that from a certain lens, I would agree with that summary. I would add to it as well, and thank you, Mick. I would say that there's no one size fits all, and we have to devise the kind of, they say, cometh the hour, cometh the man, the person, but also cometh the product. And so there's a need and a service. And very much, again, in my leadership journey, I found that every type of thinking has its place. Usually, if it's been around a long time, it's got certain amount of wisdom and it is effectiveness. But when it comes to the current day and going forward, I dare say all tactics, all themes work. So the leadership challenge is really deciding which one is fit for purpose in the current time we're in today. So in other words, if I take out Stephen Covey or any of the masters of anything and I say, okay, 50 great strategies for whatever I'm working towards my intention, then I'll have to make a judgment call as a leader with the resources, scarce or plentiful as they are, which are never enough. How can I affect change in the world in a way that's, as you'd say, meaningful? And how can we create meaningful response, which gets us onto our roadmap, which needs to be as versatile and four-dimensional as we can possibly allow it to be? Because they're just analogies. They just exist in our spreadsheets and our plans and our mission statements. So it's really important to counter and offer people the chance to be humble by being as humble as you can yourself, owning it, owning your mistakes, laughing at your mistakes if you have to, whatever it takes sometimes to show that you're willing to dust down and have an open mind. Because time and again, I'm just sort of being slightly tangential, but I'll find that we know that the quiet voices in the room often hold the keys. And the science does tell us that the loudest people often get what they want when they're asking for resources. Well, on my watch, so to speak, I think that I'll always try to find as many ways to look at and iterate on a situation as we can, because I think that the key doesn't belong to any one voice or type of approach. And you want to make sure that everyone has a voice. And sometimes that means approaching people, following on to people, asking people to sort of feel safe enough to let the guard down to say those crazy things. And you'll hear they're usually precursored with things like, oh, this might sound silly, or, those type of phrases. They usually mean you're onto something interesting. And to throw it out there even further into my methodology, if we have our intentions and we have our sort of iterations, it all sounds very good. But then I'll be offering my best sacrificial lamb of an idea to say, come on, let's make a punch bag and let's interrogate positively the positivity of this potential idea, because it's just an idea. Where do we think it could work? Could it be relating to a so-called pivot? And I think that the words and phraseology then come into play very powerfully. It is a sort of language and currency of words and meaning. So the more we spend time on defining those things, the better. And that does change day by day too. But also we find that the clever words like pivot, the sort of latter day management speak, even though it talks about different generational, millennium X, Y, etc., you have to take a lot of that with the deliberate pinch of salt to say, hang on, let's get into the physiology of our ideal customer outside of technology, outside of social classifications, outside of everything. What are the human needs here? And why are we doing this? And what does it take for us to be here for the long term? But also, what does it take for us to create a roadmap, a flexible roadmap, which can outlast or sort of outbeat, in certain contexts, competitive others as well, competitive options? And those are multifaceted conversations to have on a regular basis.
So there's three things I'm taking away there, Hubert. I want to start with your first reaction to what I was saying, and the word that's jumping into my mind is the word intentionality. And that is the leader, based on the current circumstances, the resources available, the constraints that exist, intentionally deciding which strategy to use at a certain point in time. And there's no one size fits all that will work every single time. So I loved that. The second phase I then heard was then creating the safety where all voices can be heard and all voices can be, I'm going to say, seen as well. Everyone can be seen and heard in that conversation. And then the third one was really interesting. What I was picturing in my mind, you were basically saying that an idea is just an idea, but when the idea is thrown on the table and in that group think, if it's a supportive group think, it's then the team's ability to mold it through being curious and asking the right questions. It's that ability to mold that idea into something that might solve a real world problem or might create something of genius. The idea itself is not genius until it's been worked by the group as to, like, oh, that's really interesting. What if we did this? What if we did that? Is that what I'm hearing there?
Yes, to a degree, but even that has to be elastic also. So the real leader is detaching and attaching. Kind of, there's a dichotomy at play all the time. So you're in the room, but you're trying to step in and out of. You're trying to facilitate almost as invisibly as you can. You're trying to, and visible at times. You're trying to facilitate an outcome, and that requires everyone else to. This is really good point. A really important part of the point is you're encouraging everyone else to help lead the conversation too. So if we're having an ideation and then next thing you know, you might deliberately, overtly throw the ball to the next person, or you might ask a technical person, how would they tackle a creative situation? Or how would you, again, the audience is genius. And this is something I found anecdotally when I was working in London in technology PR. You've got all the great brainstormers of the world coming up with some great plans for how to launch some piece of great new technology. Then you're in a black cab driving across London to a client. And I used to just give it like what I call the taxi driver test. And if you can't translate it into common speak, everyday speak, then it's not going to work. But the real value of those interactions was the taxi driver will almost immediately seize upon, with all your humility or not, your best laid plan, and either rip it to shreds, or more usually they'll give you some golden insights. In other words, they're listening to the radio all day and they're reading the newspaper a lot of the day. And we're talking about trying to get into the news and on the radio. And so you'd say, hey, I've got this glass of water and I'd love to start selling glasses of water or mugs of water. And I've got you've got a PR plan or a strategy, or it could be about bringing out broadband. I remember Broadband Britain was a big project we were working on. And then you'd say to those good, smart, ordinary human beings, engaged, they're more engaged than most. How on earth will I succeed in doing that? And they usually gave you golden insights, because they are golden insights, because they're real. Everything they're saying and everything they live every day is real. They're not living in an abstracted conversation. They're living their reality. So if you're lucky enough to get some insights from that reality, build them into the plan. That counts as so-called feedback. And it gives you the chance to really sense test your best thinking, but also build on that. And also, you know what? It's something I'd still do today, because it shows you, it'll give you the most up to the second input on what's happening right now here today. So you could take something, you could spend 2 weeks reading every article on a certain topic going back for 20 years, right? Or a couple of books, great. And that's really good to do that. But if you want to sense check it, you throw it out there to a taxi driver. And I'm not just making light of it. And it's certainly in full compliment to those people driving taxis. They know all of our secrets. But if you're talking to those people out there on the street, and I would consider myself one of them, then everybody knows everything. And this goes back to so many areas which fascinate me so much. I mean, I worked in satellite navigation. I'm jumping around, but it's really good. The insights are there. And people were looking for TomToms and maps, and Google Maps bring us everywhere. Back in the day, and I'm not that old, those things did not always exist. And I found myself in a new city. And what do? You say, excuse me, do you know the way to the bus station? Or excuse me, you ask people. So within that, and it comes back to the audience's genius theme, which I kind of sense is emerging, everybody knows everything. So if you stop someone on the street, if I worked for Google, I'd be saying, let's do some viral content and walk down the street and just ask everybody everything I want to know, and no phones allowed. And I'm pretty sure through 6 degrees of separation, I could find myself wherever I need to be, because the audience is genius and everybody knows everything. And you know what? I'm really glad to stumble on that, because it's really true. And it's certainly true for me. But I actually tell people that too. My little younger family, younger people, if they're going somewhere, I'd say, don't lose the ability to ask people things, because everybody knows everything. And you can't beat this local knowledge. And it's not up to date in Google. Sorry, guys.
That's really powerful. And how often do we forget? We just get buried in our devices and we don't stop and stay curious and ask the questions. That's really powerful. There were 2 things that I wanted to test there, and I'll go one at a time. The first one is, in a lot of these environments, you're in these ideation sessions, you're doing some creative workshops with your teams, etc. It might be you're working on a tender and you're working on the winning strategy of how you're going to win this tender, whatever the case may be. There's often someone in your team that is appointed as someone that is the voice of the customer. But what I'm feeling here listening to you, and I've seen this with my own eyes happen, we start believing our own BS. All right. When we start trying to empathize, we do our best. It's not through bad intentions. We do our best to try and think on behalf of the customer. But why don't we just ask the customer? Bring the customer or a representative of the customer or a taxi driver into the room and say, hey, what do you think of this idea?
Yes, very good, very good. And to some extent, it does go against the grain of what we would like to admit we know we need to do. So sometimes ritualistically, we need to build in the phrases. And I tend to load up on the important questions, which I'm very easy as the next person to kind of omit because I'm feeling good. I've had a great session. And it comes down to the classic service related questions. Have I served you well? Is there anything else I didn't do? The basic stuff ritualistically, you just do some kind of washing up, but also take it to another conversation. Bring people in from different teams. Bring in the taxi drivers. And I make light, and it sounds like fun, but I would definitely do that because I've done it. And what I do is implementing that into industry. I'll take people from one industry and put them into another in a conversation, because what's happening in the oral healthcare section where I might be working, and what we want to, I'll bring someone in from cars to tell us how our supposed same audience might be thinking, or to tell tell us what worked or did not work, because again, we need to do it as many ways as we can. We need to break out of our verticalized thinking. It's great to have vertical skills and sort of diagrammatic metaphors for how we should be orchestrating our day to day. But then it's really powerful leadership when you can come out of that and come back into it. You can say, oh, I'm an architect and I'm also going to learn how to be an engineer, because otherwise I'm sort of making designs on potential. And there's a great phrase in that area called architect's dream is an engineer's nightmare.
Yeah. And then a maintainer again is like shaking their head going, how am I going to maintain that? Right. So yeah, we've got to get those voices in the room. All right. Now let's go on that. Let's go to the voices, because this was the other question that was burning in my brain before. And you spoke about sometimes those quiet voices in the room, the gems of gold are sitting in there. And we do have extroverts in the room. We do have introverts. We have outspoken people. We have reserved people. How do we create that safety where everyone gets a chance to have their say, feels empowered to speak up, feels confident to speak up?
Yeah. And, thank you so much for that question, because we're about to stumble on absolute gold. Are you ready? I mean, I'm mocking myself, don't worry, but I'm very serious about this. How many ideation sessions and brainstorms have we been at where we're being invited to write our ideas on Post-it or do some agile or do some sort of, participation? And that's really great. Write down our ideas. What do? We force ideas to come forward, and then we start to filter them through our nervousness, or we make sure it's a damn good idea, because most of us have a little bit of a, we don't want to look stupid in front of our peers. And I know it's often a nurturing, safe environment. I get it. But I know human nature to the point that we do tend to put our good ideas forward. We do have a bias towards, we hope people put the little red dot on our ideas. We're all prone to a little bit of reassurance that we're not completely wacky in those safe environments. Okay. Now, what I will try to do is, in a situation of being asked for inputs and ideas, I will deliberately try to find a way to get the half-baked ideas out, because I don't think that the tools of even brainstorming go so far as to tease out those little insights. And the great irony here, Mick, is that we're always after insights that we can use as marketing insights. But insights don't come from the conscious mind. They come from the semi-conscious mind. So whatever it takes to get to the semi-evolved idea is well worth it. And that can mean even getting out of the room, walking around the park, going for lunch and dinner, whatever. And sometimes the best stuff does come on the back of the proverbial beer mat. And it's really, really worth highlighting. So if you really are in an area and you really want to disrupt and you really want to sense check, get into the Freudian areas where people are going to blurt out the wrong, silly thing they're afraid of saying, because that's true safe territory. And it's real gold dust, because if someone is somewhere allowing something to bubble up, bubble forward, it's not coming from their ego. It's coming from their vulnerability. And I will be the first one to try to do that, because I will always try to lead. I'm willing to lead on the front edge of that, because I think that really tests my humility as well. It's guaranteed, because they'll say, what are you talking about? And I'll say, I don't know, but let's see. Is the spirit in me? Is the genius coming through? Is the audience genius? Am I channeling some insight here? Do we need to walk to work where we can jump on a call? Am I losing it? And people say, actually, no, it's kind of possible. Then the rational people can do it. And part two of that golden nugget is, how I've learned that is simply by exploring the language, etc. But I've found myself in certain challenging situations over the years. I'd find there's one or two go-to people, and I would find the phrases coming out of me and my ask of them. And they'd often be in different organizations or industries, real friends and collegiate peers. I would say, can I just borrow your hard drive for a minute? I'm kind of full of something that needs to be solved. Can I just borrow your hard drive? I'm going to just give you some brain dump of everything, and we're going to figure it out. Can I borrow your hard drive? And I'd say that as a sort of a true word spoken in jest, which I find fascinating too, these sort of honesty things. And then next thing you know, I'm able to just park my frontal kind of cortex and say, okay, how can I rationally or try to objectively arrive at which is ultimately subjective? And at least it's out of my body, out of my thinking, and I can start to move the words around the page to manage what we might call a plan or an insight. And I find those things really, really powerful, because we haven't plugged ourselves into the matrix, etc. yet so far, but we have the ability to manipulate how we look at things. And then a true leader will be mindful of that. There's times for strong leadership where you're just sort of blunt. There are moments, tough moments, but on a day-to-day basis in a knowledge economy, dare I say, it pays to know how we frame our thoughts and minds, because then the output from those thoughts and minds can be kind of more high quality and more high value. And when I say more high value, I actually mean to culture, because culture is the playground for a lot of our modern businesses. And then we can talk about markets, or where do we find a home for these ideas, but it has to live in a culture. So the more ways we can have a mini kind of compressed cultural conversation relating to a business or a service, then the more ways we can meaningfully create a seed where we can grow something later externally.
So there's two things that I took away from that, Hugh, and I want to test it with you. So, and I'm going to go backwards this time. I'm going to go the second one, then the first one. And the second one sounded like exactly gold mining, and gold mining doesn't start with gold. It actually starts with lots of rock and rubble, etc. And sometimes you need someone's help to help you codify all of those mumble jumble in your brain. You've got all of these thoughts running through your head, and you need someone to help you filter the content from the substance, gold mining. So picking out the substance of gold from all of this BS content that's around it. And then the second one, which was actually your first one, sorry to confuse that, I was thinking the word spark. So these were the half-baked ideas where you want to mix up the environment so you get the subconscious mind involved. So you get those kind of, almost to you, they would feel silly ideas, but they might spark something in someone else. And I was picturing changing the environment. You spoke about going for a walk. People have amazing spark ideas come to them in the shower. All of these things where your mind is at rest so that the subconscious comes to the fore. And one of the things I was thinking of when you said this is I was thinking about the power of gamification. Like, what if you're in this ideation room and you just play a spontaneous word game together and just see what comes out when you give someone 3 seconds to say the first word that comes to their mind. When I say the word blur, you say the word blur, and just see what happens. So that were my two things. Either you're starting with huge amounts of content and you're filtering down to substance, or you're looking for sparks and then you're going to build from those sparks. How did that sit with you?
Very well. I love the notion of the spark and the gamification, because, you've got some, like, if we unpack that even momentarily, we'll say the gamification is really our notion of play, and how we play is how we build, and how children learn and play is like mini managed failures. And I'm very passionate on these topics because I really believe in growth, but it doesn't come without its failures. And I know there's a lot of expertise saying, oh yeah, fail is good, but I've got the battle scars from when I've tested, learned, and tried to adopt. I would say to people, show me, don't tell me. So I'd never preach on anything that I haven't really tested to the nth degree until it's in me. And I've continually reminded, the more we know, the more we don't know, and more to learn. So for sure, I'm certainly trying to walk the talk here, but also it's important to say that, failure, there's no failure in the jungle. And there's only you're surviving. It's just all tactics tend to work. Sometimes it's terminal. Okay, I get it. But also when we're trying things in business, hopefully nobody's going to have a terminal outcome for that. But sometimes, yeah. But it's really important that we can sort of keep it real. And the more neurological we can have, gamification related, if you like, the better. The more the jungle will tell us, because there's a place for that too. Unfortunately, in the maybe fortunately, in the Darwinian sense of jungle thinking, there's a dominant, there's a sort of a hierarchical thing. But in the knowledge economy, we don't have to have that. We don't have to sort of say, okay, you're gone, you lose the game of chess, you're off the board. It doesn't have to be so terminal, shall we say. And I do believe gamification can be a very powerful way, because it comes back to your opening remark on how it taps into what we want. Some people are quite strategic in the sense they'll succeed in one game, i.e. chess, and others will be born to run, and they're just going to be, climbing and jumping over the hills to get down that road, Yeah. So I'm very passionate on these ones because they're emerging. We still haven't really touched the iceberg of what a lot of these things really mean. And you know what? If I maybe be so bold, there's something in the background that perhaps one of the elephants that might be around, and that relates to regulation, policy, macro factors, macroeconomics, future of work. We've got a lot of individualized things. The culture of the day is super important, and also the other sort of social factors that may be affecting the conversations we have. It would be pointless and extremely arrogant for any of us to say, okay, here's the template. We might find within a certain macro or microeconomic or social norm, we might have, it might really work. And the reason I say that, apart from stating the obvious, that things are sort of the lineage of the lines in the tree are as big and small as the year that they relate to, sure, in the jungle thing. But also we're moving towards an era of more kind of sophisticated technology models and business models. So if we're going to talk about the application of leadership to business or technology, I mean, I've been looking at exponential organizations recently. Now, exponential organizations are, back in the day, you had a capital asset, you have a building, a factory, you're making your t-shirts, you need a manager, you need floor managers, shift managers, you need supply chain, etc. That's kind of the old way. The new way is got an acceleration to zero, where I can action my idea as quickly as I want with nearly no supply and might drop ship. You've got a multitude of ways to create and build and sustain a thin layer of global business. And we're in the end, we're only limited by our ideas, but at the end, we're more free. So with that comes, we have to have a bit of rigor in our mind, how we're going to approach leadership for teams which are decentralized, internationalized, globalized, post-globalized. We're going to work with people who are in national teams all over the place, and within that, we have to find new ways to tackle the leadership thing, because their definition of leadership isn't always ours. And it's a challenge. So we need to invest more. So we're only on the tip of the iceberg as regards modern leadership challenges, because modern business will live and die by our ability not only to execute on great thinking, but to define great thinking and to share and celebrate great thinking. And I would say that's another definition of leadership here today.
Yeah, there's two things there I want to unpack a bit further there, Hubert. You brought up the drop shipping example. I don't necessarily want to talk about drop shipping, but it was a good example of the fact that the world has changed and there are less constraints today than there might have been previously around what you could innovate and be creative with. However, I think if we did it right now, if we polled 100 CEOs and asked them, what would you like your team to be more of? A lot of them would say, I want them to be more innovative and creative. So in a world where there are less constraints away from innovation and creativity, what are the limiting beliefs that are stopping us from being more innovative and creative?
Well put, indeed. And I think that's, again, why the definitions of these pillars are so critical to the future of business. We're finding that it's perhaps a bit ironic that we're reliant on technology so much, but the technology is only going to be as good as our ability to be critical with it. And that relates to language and neuro-linguistic approaches to plasticity of our definitions or explicitity of our intentions as well. And I think that, that's a really good example. And SEO, you could relate to that, search engine optimization. The things we look back and say are Web 1.0, oh my gosh, how ancient that thinking is now. Well, it's not that long ago we were all thinking, who's good or bad, or how do we approach SEO? Nowadays those tools have become more kind of public and we can kind of hack our own success. But again, the responsibility of the freedom is deciding what we want and working towards that. And leadership is trying to say, okay, like marketing innovation is a nice way to say, okay, we've got marketing, we've got our product, our intentions, and our suite of resource and team members. But marketing innovation is, okay, let's apply some leadership and say, what's the best way to get what we want with what we have, or what's missing, or what do we need to have some innovation with, whether it's email marketing or SEO or PR or whatever tactics, or a kind of cocktail or a secret cocktail of all of the above to get us what we need. And then, I know it's a long point, but at the end of that, it's ultimately a human dynamic. So in the advertising world, we used to say people don't remember where they saw the ad. They just remember that they've seen the ad. They don't really remember if it was a magazine or a billboard or a flyer or even a television. They might just remember that, oh yes, they better brush their teeth or whatever the ad might be saying. So that sort of shows you back even in the early day, like just a decade or two ago, that people were not always sure about the medium. And, McLuhan will often say, to his credit, Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. Well, it's still the message. We're still humans. And I know we're touching on areas of like potential, singularities and those things, but we're still humans. And so we're still communicating in a human way. We still have relationships, for better or worse. They can be polarized, they can be frayed, they can be at risk, and they can be even confused, but they're still human relationships. So business and leadership and management management, to use a slightly dirty word these days, and outcomes is about our ability to harness and nurture deep relationships, or shallow relationships, but relationships that point towards the outcome. And so what I do is, I'm coming from the old 20th century, if you want. I would say, let's be clear about what we're trying to do as a collective, and what are the rules of the collective, and how much are we going to show and demonstrate that we stand for the collective, not just hiring, firing type of, that's meaningless to me. That doesn't matter. I don't ever want to talk about that, but I want to talk about the mission and what are the rules of the tribe and what I expect of people coming into our group, our collegiate group, and our collective well-being, which I would dedicate myself towards protecting. And the rules are very, very black and white, and there's no joking with those rules, because they're everything depends on my ability to implement protection and also creativity and the human values. So I want to give people the sense of hope and optimism. There's a lot of confusing phraseology and insights around, but if we deal with people on an interpersonal human level, we have the ability to influence on people on a mass multitude level. So the jokes that we'll have in the first part of our conversation so far would be like about everyone knows everything. They're not jokes. They're actually hallmarks of leadership. And if we were doing some sort of test for leadership, I watch people to see, can they fix a problem? And I think people watch me too. I was very proud recently when people will say, oh, I'm at a conference actually. And people said the person running the conference, who I just know, was explaining how one of our sponsors can't install a thing. Don't suppose you know a plumber. I said, I don't live in this country, but I'll see what I can do. And I got a plumber. But it's our ability to talk to people, and just by asking one or two people, you'll get there. That's what leadership's about.
So a few takeaways that I got there. First one is that regardless of how much technology changes and how rapidly it changes, leadership and business is still about people. And then making some clear choices about what are we going to do with the technology at our fingertips. So when we are innovating, when we are using this technology, are we using it for some altruistic purpose that has purpose and meaning, that makes the world a better place, that serves people in some kind of way? Or are we just doing things because we can, or are we doing things for non-altruistic reasons? And non-altruistic, it can be malicious, or it can be, it can be malicious or malintent, or sometimes it can be unintended consequences, which does worry me a little bit with some of the technology that evolves today, where good intentions may have been around some of that technology, but things like algorithmic bias kicks in, and before you know it, we've created something that was beyond what we imagined. So I'd love to unpack that a little bit more. So leadership about people, having a clear purpose and meaning, but how do we control to make sure that our innovation and creativity does not create a monster of unintended consequences?
Now we're talking. And I would say, first of all, protect our culture. There's several points to this. So so first and foremost, protect our culture. That relates to constitutional free speeches. That relates to open free press. That relates to even pronouns. It relates to whatever the culture of the day is, whether we like it or we have difficulty. Protecting a sense of culture is super no-brainer, obvious stuff, which we don't talk enough about. Because culture will always go underground. If we try to introduce thought speak, or we go Orwellian and dystopian, okay, I'd like to think that the nature of the jungle and the nature of humanity will always find a way to protect free thinking. And so free thinking is a really important part of a lot of the dilemmas that we would attach to leadership and people, and also the dilemmas and the problems of our era and our age. Our next innovations are not going to come from innovators. They're going to come from leaders who can innovate. And innovation is not a sort of a textbook that I've swallowed back when I was working in one of the big, no, it has to be. And it depends on and lives and dies on our ability to nurture it with fresh thinking, fresh nutrition, So protect our culture is really important, because that protects our ability to think, which now ties into the second point. The greatest risk to our century, I would say, and this is something that I took from 1990s, studying information society in the 90s, that even then it was forecast forecast, which is miraculous. I can't remember which book it was in. The greatest risk to our current this century is not the lack of money or something. It's a lack of critical reasoning, because critical reasoning has been shown early days of the internet has been almost immediately started to create a curve where our ability to critique things started to become slowly more eroded by supposed versions of the truth, which ultimately became expounded into, now we might say, fake news or whatever else. But the only counter we have is not going to be regulation alone of the social medias and how we regulate for AI or whatever else the topic may be now or going forward. It'll be our ability to train people in our culture to think for themselves. And leadership, my flag is to the pole. Leadership, it depends on, it doesn't come from, innovation comes from leadership. Innovation will always come from leaders. Innovation will live and die by our ability to create new nutrition based on facts, ideology, values, technology, all mashed up together, squeezed through the grinder of a need somewhere to try and create some value for the altruistic or non-altruistic need in the world today. That's what drives people, and all underscored by motivation. So that's why leaders have the taste of hunger, they have the taste of ambition, and they have the taste of existential need for innovation. And then we have the conversations, and they know how to map people together. And I know we'll see a lot of headlines and clickbait around about who the leaders are, one-person businesses and things like that, and be a digital nomad. I'm okay with all of that, but real innovation is a different thing. Innovation is a leader. If someone's innovating as a digital nomad from an island in the Philippines, then I know, and I think it wouldn't take long to show if they really are innovating, that they're mapped into a team somewhere using technology, values, all the things that we've outlined here today. So I'm quite excited about that. And of course, I get concerns like everyone else, but I think that the cometh the hour, cometh the man, as we say. I don't like the man part, cometh the hour, cometh the person. And that really relates to the challenges. So it's almost like directly proportional to the challenges. If we have big, tough challenges, then we have great leaders. What is that? So let's create these artificial great challenges. And sometimes we call it a brainstorm, and then we create the environment. So there's a huge element of existentialism to the notion of leadership and innovation. Why? Because innovation comes from leaders, I feel. It doesn't come from itself until, of course, there's some dystopian thing. But, you get my point.
I think that's a great way of rounding us out, to hear that message that innovation comes from leaders. And it circles back to what we were talking about from very early on today in our conversation. Now we're not just talking about bringing people together, and it's also about bringing all kinds of resources, technology, all kinds of things in their sphere to co-create something greater than what exists today. So innovation comes from leaders and their ability to bring something together. The next key message was about protecting the culture, create the culture, protect the culture, and make sure that that culture is based on values and beliefs. These are the things that I'm taking away from our conversation today, Hubert. I'd like to now take us to our rapid round. So these are the same 4 questions that we ask all of our guests. So what's the one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20?
I'm going to go into my kind of recent memories. I think that having a certain amount of technological or financial literacy can be very advantageous, because the words I've gone and invested in that. But, if I was doing it again, I would always be perhaps scratched a certain itch to be even. And I did scratch an itch, really, personally speaking. Having an ability to measure and quantify the words that we use would actually go really well with the words that we use. So in other words, it's critical reasoning related. I'm doing a leadership thing on myself, but I would say back in the day when I'm in my 20s, the more tangible, and I did study engineering first time, so I did do a bit of that, but for different reasons, so I won't count that. I would say my advice to my 20th self, study more of the financial literacy stuff, because the engineering stuff is binary as well as technology, and something within that space. It might not be financial, but it could be certainly technological and a certain amount measurable.
Yeah, really nice. All right, what's your favorite book?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of having flashes from 1 or 2 people in my world who will make fun of me sometimes for quoting Sean Anker's The Happiness Advantage, which I actually ironically bought in Australia in an airport, and I thought it had the worst title of a book I ever came across, and I spent my last $13 on, because I was going to Singapore on the way back to Europe, and I thought, I'll just read this, it looks mad, because it's a Harvard professor, well revered, and I thought, what's this silly title book about? And I thought, actually it was really good. And what I liked about it was it was very amusing experiments and really sort of psychological sort of insights as to how important it is to be happy. And it's not just to feel okay about yourself, because the 20th century, and this comes into something I really want to drop, if you allow me, we're raised to go through the college, go through school, get the job, save the money and get the house, get the life, and then be happy. And then, that's it. When Professor Sean Anker turned and showed us all that actually the more happy-go-lucky we are at the beginning, the more we're going to succeed with all of our exploits over the years, and the more we're going to get the job and the house and the happiness. So I realized I swallowed my humble pill on that flight. I realized, terrible title for a great book. That's what I found myself saying. And my ego was thinking, that's a crappy book, because happy had been hijacked in marketing spheres. But I'm taking it back now, so credit to him. The other thing I wanted to say to you was, I've noticed how you're looking up sometimes when you're thinking of a question. And this really was my favorite book for many years. It's the Jose de Silva's Mind Method. I'm sure some of your followers and readers would highly recommend it. And some of the great takeouts from that is, he found that if you want to find out where you left your car keys, he was trying to train his children. And this is brilliant innovation from him, and leadership, all of the above. De Silva Mind Method. What a great book. I found it at home. Don't think my parents were particularly academic or whatnot. I just found it, read it, and I swallowed the thing. Found when you're looking for your car keys, look up 30 degrees to the left. You do this sort of squint. Where to leave He did that, and he found that it opens up your sort of memory. And next thing you know, so you can deliberately do that. That's a beautiful thing. So I'd say check that one out and try it next time you can't find the car keys. And the other thing is, and this is coming from my personal relating to books, I've been writing as well, and I enjoy the truth. I'm always trying to stay close to the truth, as you can tell, I hope by now. And I feel that I've been doing talks and writings about what I call the career myth. Now, I'm a marketeer, I'm a storyteller, and I use those words very carefully because I'd like to frame a narrative. But my notion of career mythology is very real. I feel that corporations in the 20th century will have been trying to soak up the fresh new talent and put them into the vertical silo to never be seen of or heard again, except if it was on the terms of the corporation. Now, I think we're living in a post-corporate world, not just a post-globalized world, where we've got lots more independent thinking. And my critical sense is saying we don't even need a career in the old sense. A new career is multidynamic, is playful, is creative, as we were saying, as you said, with gamification. And, we have to be able to take responsibility a bit more for ourselves, because the age-old career gold watch after 40-year service just doesn't exist anymore. So I believe that entrepreneurship is closer to the reality, for better or worse, that we now face ourselves in today. And I think that the leadership takeout here will be, if people feel they're feeding their critical reasoning, they're feeling reassured in their capabilities in a vertical and lateral sense, then they're able to express and articulate those abilities, then they can succeed. Because I don't want people to feel over-reliant on a ethereal corporate, this is my values, which may or may not care about them anymore, because, these are realities that we live in right now, and it's the future of work. So that's the next podcast, right? But those are my favorite books. So The Career Myth is a book that's definitely in all of us, and I could tell from the topics we've covered here that there's a lot going on, and we could cover in that too.
All right, very good. And what is your favorite quote?
Oh, so many. Well, I've just coined one at the start of this chat. Everybody knows everything. So that's just one from me. But so it's self-styled, but so many favorite quotes. Stay hydrated. I'm just thinking of what people would come to me. That's again from me now. Enough about me. But my favorite quote was, be yourself, only better.
Be yourself, only better. I love it. Yeah, that's a really good one. All right. And finally, I'm sure people are going to be fascinated by everything that you've shared today. And it's certainly going to challenge people's thinking to stop and think and reflect about what it does mean to innovate, what it does mean to be creative, what it does mean to lead innovation. How do people find you if they would like to know more?
Yes, I would just say to people, if you look up at Hubert Grealish, I'm the only one ever. You'll find me on all the socials, all the platforms, Twitter handle at Hubert Grealish, and for sure you'll find me. That's with a H, Hubert Grealish.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. You've certainly made me stop and rethink a few things and challenge my thinking, and I know you have done that with the audience as well. Thank you for sharing your insights and wisdom today.
Thank you very much, Mick, and all the best to you and your followers and readers.
Thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mixbeers.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.